really know him, but he was from the UK and started this ministry in South Africa, and now they minister all over uh, the southern hemisphere of Africa. They can't go above the Saharan desert region and those countries above that because of Islam. But they're in many countries below the desert, all the way down to the very tip of South Africa. And so I went with them before a few years ago in 2021, and I got a chance to go back, and we preached on the doctrine of God, and we preached 5 conferences, 3 in Nigeria and 2 in Ghana. And it was just a wonderful experience. I loved every minute of it. And it was a learning experience. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And of course, I've got stories. And so we just don't have time for me to tell all of my stories, but I'm happy to tell a few. But I will say this: I'm very excited about Western Africa. So let me just give you a kind of history lesson on Western Africa. When we talk about Western Africa, we're talking about the part of Africa, the side of Africa that is on the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, it's the closest side of Africa to us, and it is where the transatlantic slave trade began. And I can't tell you how much they taught me. I'm talking about African Nigerians taught me about the transatlantic slave trade and about slavery in general. And let me just tell you, if you think you know something about slavery and you're from America, even if you're a black American, you probably don't know. But there's a lot that they can tell you, and they taught me. For one thing, slavery really started it was already going on between the tribes in Africa. So when it was just a common thing, just like in the American Indians, when one tribe would conquer another, they would take slaves. That's nothing new. That's been going on all around the world as long as we know it. And that was a common thing. And it was going on primarily in Western Africa. That was the strongest area militarily and for multiple reasons. The Muslims, Islam was coming from the north, Egypt, North Africa, and it was making progress in a southern direction, southernly. Is that how you say that? Southward. The Sahara Desert slowed Islam, but did not stop it. And so Islam, around the 17th century, Islam was making inroads into the southern part of Africa, including the Congo and including Western Africa. They were making raids. The Muslims were coming out of the desert, making raids into Western Africa, and they were taking slaves. Well, the warlords in Western Africa saw an opportunity for business, and so they set up slave trading, particularly in Ghana and in Nigeria, and they were selling slaves. They were going out, gathering slaves from their conquered tribe. There was a lot of tribal feuding and things like that. They would go out, they would get people, they would enslave them and sell them. Well, it wasn't long before the British heard about this in the 1600s. And so the British said, well, we'll go down there and we will we'll buy slaves too. Where did they go? They went to Ghana and Nigeria. Why did they go there? A lot of people think that they went there just on a discovery voyage. They discovered African people and they said, let's enslave them. That's not at all what happened. They went there because of the slave trade that was going on. And so but this is the British. This is not the North African Muslims. They went there in power, and they established colonial outposts there. And that's how the slave trade got going. When the Americans got going, then the Americans started buying slaves from there too. So that was a lot of what was going on. Now, in the 70s, Britain and France, who both had colonies on the west coast of Africa, they pulled out, and they gave those nations back to the people. And when that happened, that was in the 70s sometime, oil was discovered in Nigeria, and gold was already discovered in Ghana, but it became a very big thing. Instead of those nations becoming rich and prosperous, warlords took over and started stealing the money. And so those areas have a lot of resources, but the people, they don't have private ownership rights. There's not real true democracy there or anything like that. So the people are very poor. Fast forward to the 80s. In the 1980s, America started exporting prosperity religion to Nigeria and Ghana and Western Africa, but mostly to Nigeria and to Ghana. And it caught hold. I don't know if you've ever had a chance, but Conrad Mbewe, who's on the southeastern side of Africa, he's called the Spurgeon of Africa. He wrote a very good book, and I can't remember the name of that book, in which he explains why the prosperity gospel took hold so readily in Western Africa. And to put it simply, what he said was the prosperity preachers took the place of the witch doctors, of the medicine men, or whatever we would call them. He calls them witch doctors. That's why they call themselves the man of God. You've heard that term, the man of God, the man of God? Conrad said that's nothing more than just the prosperity preacher acting in the place of the witch doctor. And it caught on, and we exported that. And so if you go to Nigeria today, I was telling somebody in Louisiana, we have a church on every other corner. In Nigeria, on one street, they have 4 churches. I mean, every 400 feet, they have a church. Churches like the Apostle, Bishop of whatever, Word of Faith, this and that and the other thing. And it's big, big business, and everybody's doing it in hopes of making money. There's no middle class in Nigeria and Ghana. You're either extremely poor or you're extremely wealthy. Well, over here in America, our celebrities are extremely wealthy. Like we have NBA players, or we have actors and actresses. Over there, they have prosperity preachers who are at the top of the food chain. So I was in a city called Lagos, which is a city of 23 million people. It's a city the size of New Orleans, maybe Atlanta, as far as land mass is concerned. But there's 23 million people. That's 5 times the population of Louisiana in that city. And in that city, there is a section of that city for the uber wealthy. I went through it, and almost everybody who lives in that section are prosperity preachers. Every 50 foot, there's a billboard of one of these guys on there, and everybody knows who they are over there, and they're uber wealthy. Well, the reason I wanted to tell you that is because as much work as African Pastors Conference has been doing at taking and training pastors and teaching sound doctrine, sound theology, that's what we do at African Pastors Conference. We train pastors, we give them books, which they can't get because they're so expensive. We sell them books very cheap. And we're we're working hard to create, to plant sound churches, and they're churches that are African. They're not American churches, so it's not like Southern Baptist churches or anything like that. They're African churches. We want to help them to be sound so that they can plant churches. Well, we've done that on the east side of Africa in Zambia and in Malawi and in places like that. And there's a guy over there, I mentioned his name before, Conrad Mbewe. That's where Conrad is, and he really doesn't even need us anymore. That's where Vodi was when Vodi was over there. And they've got a seminary and they've got churches everywhere, and they are just as solid as can be. And we've been focusing resources over there because so much has been going on. And it's just a beautiful thing to see if you ever get a chance to go to Eastern Africa and see the influence that African Pastors Conference and Conrad Mbewe, who's on our board, has made over there. There's just so many. I mean, you think something's going on in Louisiana? It's nothing compared to Eastern Africa. I mean, they're as reformed as you can get over there. But they've been largely ignoring Western Africa because of these prosperity churches. So what I was most surprised to find when I went over there is that there are young people. You know, I was telling you that we used to be the young people in Louisiana as far as reform. We're not the young people anymore. But there are people over there who are Harrison's age. Where's Harrison at? Harrison's age and Dylan's age and Evan's age in their early 20s. These people were coming in droves to the conferences that I was preaching at. And it's kind of sad because they thought that I was somebody because I was from America. And so they all want to take pictures with me and everything like that. I kept telling them, you know, I'm serious. I'm not anybody. But they thought, well, no, if you're from America and you came over here, you're like James, you know, like we should think about James White and all those guys. They thought I was one of those guys. So, but they are on fire. And this is what they were telling me. They were saying, we're sick and tired of the superficiality of these churches. There's nothing here for us, and we're sick of it. We want substance. And they were asking me what books they should be reading. So I started out the way we started out. I said, well, you know, read The Gospel According to Jesus by John MacArthur. We already read that. Now they're reading this on Kindle. They don't have these books. They can't get these books. So I said, okay, we'll read The Holiness of God. We read that already. I said, well, read Pilgrim's Progress. We read that already. I said, okay, well, how about The Death of Death and the Death of Jesus? John Owen. We're reading that now, they said. I said, well, okay, well, I said, you guys are getting down to, I said, look, read anything by the Puritans then. And so that's what we're doing. We're bringing them books that they can't, because they can't buy like Dr. Boyce's systematic theology. They can't buy these books. And we were buying these books and selling them at a loss. So we were selling these books. If you can imagine a set of Calvin's commentaries or some kind of good systematic being sold pennies on the dollars, and that's what we're doing. So that's how that went. I loved every second I was there. It's hot. Philip was asking me, is it hot? It's Louisiana in August and September without air conditioning, and it's like that year round over there. So it's hot, and the food is spicy, which was good. The food was not spicy in South Africa and Botswana when I went there. It was terrible. The food is spicy in Nigeria and Ghana, but it's still a lot of meat that is suspect. So a lot of time, so I will tell you this, in Nigeria, they're very respectful. All the children would bow to me. And I'm not talking about I'm talking about they would bow. They would stop and they would bow. And when people found out I was a pastor, adults would bow. It's just, that's ingrained in them. And it's a whole nother system. Yes.
So a question I had, Kayla showed me a couple things just since you've been back.
Mhm.
It said, I don't have Facebook anymore, but she showed me, and it says Nigeria. I know Nigeria is probably a big place, but is there a lot of killings and like
Yes.
Christians going on over there?
Yes, there is.
What
It's
was your
Islam.
experience like? Did people come to you and they have experiences seeing this or dealing with this?
So Nigeria is the largest country in Africa. It's big, and it's like Louisiana. North Louisiana is very different from southern Louisiana. In Nigeria, they even speak a different language, like 3 or 4 different languages, differently. And so they would not allow me to go to North Nigeria. I would not have survived.
That's where all these killings.
That's right. Remember, I told you that Islam is coming from the north down. And so the northern part of Ghana and Nigeria, the Muslims are coming from a country called Niger, and from the Congo's in the center, the northern part of the Congo, which is Rwanda, the dangerous Muslim, because there's 2 different kind of Muslims. There's Shiite Muslim and there's Sunni Muslim. There's 2 different kind of Muslims in Nigeria too. So there were Muslims in the area that I was. They're all Sunni. The Shiite version are coming from the north, and they control the north. They completely control the north. And so everywhere I went outside of the big city, there's 2 big cities I was in: Accra they call it, and Lagos. Lagos is in Nigeria, and Accra is in Ghana. Nobody paid any attention to me over there in those 2 cities. When I went out of those cities to do conferences in a place called Ibadan and in a city called Kumasi, I was the only white person, and I kid you not, that I saw. And everybody was looking at me. And so if I had gone to the north, there would have been nowhere to hide. And so they won't let me go to the north. So yes, it is dangerous in the northern part of Nigeria, and it's dangerous in the Congo for people.
They're looking out for your safety while you're there.
Yeah. I never went anywhere alone except in Lagos. They let me, I stayed by myself in Lagos. It's a big city. Nobody paid any attention to me. And I actually wandered out of it. Everybody lives in compounds. Every building so every store is behind a compound, a big wall, a big 6-foot or 8-foot wall. And everybody's behind those. And it's the same way when I was in South Africa. That's where they live. That's how they live. And in Lagos, I went outside and walked around. Nobody paid any attention to me. But they would not let me do that anywhere else. So, yep. Yes?
Ed's ministry still continues after all those years of Baptist conferences that we did.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They are. Yeah. So, yeah, Ed knew Errol and those guys. And so, yeah, there was a connection there. Ed was on the eastern side. So Ed was going around Kenya and that area, except he was not on the coast. He was like in the interior, in a very remote area, closer to Congo. So now that but Conrad has had such a transformative effect on all of that, it's unbelievable. Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's still needed, but it's unbelievable. They're doing better over there than we are doing here. A lot of ways. Yeah. Yeah. But Ed, yeah, they all knew Ed. A lot of them, yeah, knew Ed real well. And I told him about the story of Ed. I remember that story you told where the young girl got killed I told them that story. And they said, even in Nigeria, it was the same way. They said, yeah, that there's a lot of vigilante justice that would happen. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's very much a generational thing. It's an amazing thing. It's happening here too. It happened here earlier. It happened in the late 90s and 2000s here, but it's very much a generational thing there. And so what I was telling those guys, like in Kumasi, Kumasi is a nice size city, about the size of Baton Rouge, in Ghana, and it's a college town, university town, and it was a beautiful place. And the host of the conference was at an Assemblies of God church, okay, and it was like, it wasn't just an Assemblies of God church; it was like the hub of the Assemblies of God church. But those people were all in their 60s and 70s, the leadership of that church, but they were not health and wealth, prosperity. They were the old school Assemblies of God. They're still Orthodox. They believe, yeah, I mean, I disagree with a lot of their what's called pneumatology, how they understand theology of the Holy Spirit and things like that. But those were like my dad's kind of charismatics. Those were still Orthodox people, but they just got carried away with, and that's who was there. And I told them, I said, here's the thing. You're not going to be able to transfer that to your children, because your children are not going to stay Orthodox and be like you guys, be Orthodox for the most part, except speak in tongues and carry on like that. Your children are going to go with Todd White and all of those Looney Tunes who are not even Orthodox. You know, they're putting beds up on the stage and simulating sex and all that kind of stuff. They didn't really understand. Those old people, they didn't get that. They just, you know, they love Jesus, and they don't read, you know, they just pray in the Spirit and they dance around and stuff like that. That's what they want to do. But I try to tell them, you're not going to keep handing this down to your children. They're not going to be interested in this. They're going to want to get Looney Tune, or they want substance. So when Orthodox people go, when Reformed people go over there with historically accurate theology, it perks up the ears of that next generation. And that's where, I'm telling you, there were 400 people in Ibadan at that conference in what used to be a Southern Baptist church, but Southern Baptist pulled out and gave it to Nigerian Baptists. There were 400 people listening to me preach on the transcendence of God, on the immanence of God, on these kinds of things that they ain't never heard in their lives. All they've heard is the superficial charismatic stuff. And the older people, they were, very sweet and very kind, but it didn't really impress them much. But the young people were coming out. I'm telling you, they were acting like I was, somebody that I wasn't. But it was a wonderful experience. Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity. I have more stories. If you want to hear more stories, I can tell you.